San Francisco swept its homeless under the rug when communist dictator Xi Jinping came to town. Now that the spotlight's gone, it's back to business with rampant homelessness and drug abuse. Meanwhile, lawmakers are proposing some peculiar solutions. Welcome to America Uncovered. I'm Chris Chappell. So San Francisco took the world spotlight last month when it hosted the APEC summit. San Francisco, a city known around the world for being a homeless mecca full of drugs, crime, and human feces, raced to clean it up in the weeks ahead of APEC. They cleaned up and beautified the streets, drove away the homeless, at least in certain areas, and also cracked down on open-air drug markets. San Francisco made sure to keep that away for as long as the global leaders were there, which seemed pretty insulting to residents, especially when California Governor Gavin Newsom himself admitted that San Francisco cleaned up for the world leaders rather than, the people living there and paying taxes.
I know folks say, oh, they're just cleaning up this place because all those fancy leaders are coming into town. That's true, because it's true. But it's also true for months and months and months prior to APEC, we've been having different conversations.
Residents weren't amused. In fact, many predicted that the homeless would simply come back once APEC ended. And they were right, which isn't surprising since everybody could see it a mile away.
This was a common sight near the Moscone Center during APEC. Now that the fencing has been removed, residents like Tyson Wrench says tents are returning to the sidewalks.
We're starting to see it come back, but slowly.
One business owner said things are just as bad as they've ever been. Nothing has changed. They cleaned it up for a couple of days, but nothing permanent. Even those who thought people were overhyping San Francisco's homelessness crisis are now shocked to see it for themselves.
But this is like an open-air trap house. It's just ground zero of the fentanyl crisis. You've got people literally smoking fentanyl, taking these drugs out on the streets. And of course, you've got the tents and camps while you've got a playground with children playing right nearby. And this is blocks away from the mayor's office. It's just unbelievable to me that a city and country with such immense wealth can have such just blatant poverty and suffering.
Yeah. According to the San Francisco Chronicle, even in the Tenderloin, some local leaders said they were seeing signs that the pre-APEC status quo is returning to their neighborhoods, which has long struggled to address open-air drug markets and homelessness. As it turns out, people were only shooed away from these central city areas. Some took to living on rooftops. San Francisco officials are very well aware that homelessness will continue to be a sore headache, even as they aim to make Union Square, a tourist area known for shopping, the safest place in urban America. Surprisingly, tourists don't like getting mugged when they shop, and officials sure could use the revenue. As much as San Francisco officials tout that they'll make Union Square the safest place in urban America, there are a lot of problems that might get in the way, the first being the persistent homelessness crisis. According to an official at the San Francisco Homelessness and Supportive Housing Department, San Francisco's shelter system is 91% full, which is another way of saying it's on the verge of facing even more serious problems. As of November 27th, there were close to 500 pending shelter waitlist applications, which was the same amount as in August earlier this year. And that month saw just 13 people get beds. That's right, 13. So San Francisco managed to add 300 new shelter beds ahead of the winter months. But chances are San Francisco will continue to struggle handling its homeless. Connected to the homelessness crisis is another crisis: rampant drug use. San Francisco's still in the midst of an opioid crisis fueled by fentanyl. Over the past year, lawmakers have pushed for Narcan, a brand of naloxone, that reverses fentanyl overdoses, to be available everywhere. Not only in every pharmacy, but in gas stations, bars, and libraries, and even many schools in the Bay Area are carrying it. Yet it seems that things have only gotten worse. There's so much drug use that San Francisco's on pace for its deadliest year yet amid its overdose crisis. Between January and October of this year alone, there were almost 700 overdose deaths, more than 80% of which came from fentanyl. Unfortunately, this isn't limited to San Francisco alone. Things are getting bad across the board in California, which is why Gavin Newsom is resorting to desperate measures. I'll tell you what those are after the break. Welcome back. California is like that lemon sports car you bought in high school. Sure, it looked cool when it wasn't in the shop, costing more in repairs than you bought it for. As I mentioned in previous episodes, California is famous not just for Hollywood glam, but for the glam of rampant drug use and homelessness. And if that weren't bad enough, California officials fear things could somehow even get worse. To help stop that from happening, Newsom announced that he would sponsor legislation that would crack down on the flesh-eating zombie drug known as tranq, which is often mixed with fentanyl. Tranq, the street name for the animal tranquilizer xylazine, would be classified in the bill as a controlled substance and increase criminal penalties for illegally trafficking it. But this is a rare change from California's usual focus on treatment over punishment. What Newsom won't depart from, however, is California's good old tradition of just throwing money at the problem. Last week, Newsom dished out an additional $300 million to clean up homeless encampments.
Tonight, California Governor Gavin Newsom ratcheting up efforts to clean out those homeless encampments, the ones that have become synonymous with some of the state's biggest cities. Newsom pledging $300 million to sweep out the encampments, promising to provide support to the people displaced. The governor says the state has already cleaned out roughly 5,700 encampments since July 2021.
This is on top of the over $400 million that the state recently awarded from the Encampment Resolution Fund, which was established by state lawmakers in 2021 to help local jurisdictions provide more housing options for people living in encampments near highways. According to a news release for the additional $300 million, the funds will end on June 30th, 2024, or when the funds are exhausted, whichever comes first. Homeless advocates criticize the move, arguing that this doesn't provide long-term solutions and just focus more on just clearing out encampments. They point to the fact that half of the money is going to Caltrans, a state transportation agency tasked with clearing encampments, instead of going somewhere that is actually involved in housing people. Newsom, however, insists that it's not just about removing encampments and that this would help the homeless get access to housing. Sounds like a Soviet policy. Our hospitals have a 0% death rate because we send patients to die at home. Problem solved. He also blasted local officials and rejected every city's homelessness plan last year. As an example of just how bad California cities are, when Newsom asks cities to set targets for reducing homelessness, Sacramento promised to not allow homelessness to grow by more than 71%. Newsom thought it was a typo. It wasn't. So why is Newsom so suddenly determined to solve the problem? Probably desperation, especially as it seems more and more likely that Newsom's going to run for U.S. president at some point. So what cost-effective alternatives are there to address the homelessness crisis? One San Francisco mayoral candidate proposes expanding and making permanent then San Francisco Mayor Gavin Newsom's Homeward Bound program to bus the homeless out of the city. That program has seen its ups and downs, but it's been considered successful, so San Francisco is dusting it off again. I wonder if Eric Adams borrowed this idea for New York City. So it might not be so far-fetched for all of California to eventually resort to mass deportations. But it's not just the homeless who are having trouble finding housing. For many millennials, owning your own home is also a fantasy. Of course, since YouTube might consider talking about that sensitive, I've hidden that topic in the latest episode of my new show, Deep Thoughts While Gaming, where I hide controversial topics in gaming content. This week's episode is about Animal Crossing and why you'll never be a homeowner. Check it out. And while you're at it, hit that orange button to support America Uncovered on Patreon. There's plenty of shelter in our community, even on the roofs. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. Thanks for watching America Uncovered.